I had a real good friend of mine almost died, and he's a Mormon, not a Norse Pagan, but he's probably one of my closest friends in the world, and we've had a lot of dirt time, and we've done a lot of things together. He bought himself a canoe, and while he's not a canoeist, he was certainly a bushcrafter. So he was out one day just paddling by himself, doing some fishing, and so if you've never been in a canoe before, like one of the golden rules of a canoe is if you drop your paddle, you never reach for it. He dropped his paddle and he reached for it, and he capsized his canoe. I know that for somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and 45 minutes, my friend was out there alone. It got dark, so majority of this time he was out there alone in the dark of the water. He could not see the shore. The moon hadn't risen. There were no stars, and he was just paddling for dear life. Paddling. His life preserver was not adequate, and it was to the point where his ears and everything was underwater, and all he could do was just barely breathe through his nose and just paddle. So he didn't die. He was rescued, but after the fact, it finds out that there was a family camping on the shore that had heard some commotion and didn't know what it was. They jumped in their car and they raced 45 minutes or something down the mountain because they couldn't get cell signal till they could get to some place where they could call. And the ambulance came up and the helicopter came in and all that stuff came in. And then when he was out there, at about an hour 45 mark, there was another canoe or a paddle boat or something, and they're shining a flashlight and calling out his name. And he couldn't hear very well because his ears were underwater. He had to will himself, but he said he had to get out of the boat of his own strength and he went to his Jeep and he changed into dry clothes, and then he went and got into the ambulance. He did that all under his own strength after almost dying on the water. And so it's weird because I'd known the story already. We had talked a few times after it happened, and then he just called me out of the blue one day when I was struggling, when I was like really deep into it, when I was really going through it. And he said that something occurred to him. He didn't realize that so many things were going on to save him. He was alone in the dark, paddling for his life with no hope of recovery, no hope. All he could ever do was hope that somehow or another he managed to paddle close to shore where he could touch the ground. That's all. For an hour and 45 minutes. He didn't realize that so many wheels were in motion to save him. And so when I was like at my worst, I don't know how he even knew, truthfully. He just called me out of the blue and we just start talking. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm in a really bad place. There's a lot of stuff going on in my personal life and, things I'm trying to get through. And he's like, hey, man, this is what I learned. He said, you don't have to drive the ambulance and you don't have to fly the helicopter. All you have to do is breathe. Just keep treading water. Just keep breathing. Somebody else will drive the ambulance. Somebody else will drive the helicopter. Somebody else is paddling the rescue boat. Somebody else is doing all the work. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. And then